Um, Last week, the Iowa Supreme Court came back with a ruling with respect to sexual discrimination or sexual harassment in the workplace that involved Melissa Nelson and James Knight. Melissa Nelson was like a dental hygienist or something to that effect, and James Knight was a dentist in Fort Dodge. And the Iowa Supreme Court ruled that firing someone because of their attractiveness isn't isn't discriminatory treatment. They ruled and if you listen to their reasoning behind it, in their opinion, they say that when you fire someone because of their physical attractiveness, you're firing them because not because they're a woman or a man or anything of that nature, but you're firing them for the feelings that have been developed, and firing someone for your feelings you have towards them isn't discriminatory treatment. Finding someone attractive and firing them because of that isn't discriminatory. It's not like you're firing them specifically because they're a man or a woman. You're firing them for the attractiveness you feel for them. But here's the problem with that logic. Let me make sure I get this right. It doesn't really matter what form of discrimination you're engaged in, whether it's racial discrimination, sexual discrimination, gender, religious, sexual orientation discrimination, ethnic discrimination, any kind of discrimination you're engaged in. All discrimination is based on how you feel towards a person. All discrimination involves feelings. So it's absurd to suggest that firing someone because of the way you feel for them isn't discrimination. How can you have racial discrimination against someone unless you feel some way about them? Similarly, how can you have this sexual discrimination against someone unless you have a feeling about them because of their sex? The whole idea behind discrimination is that you're feeling a way about that group or person in that group for some reason, and you're treating them differently because of the way you feel about them as a person in that group. If they had been a member of a different group, would there still been discrimination? Would you have still had that feeling? And the answer is no. You're feeling that way towards that person based solely on their membership in that group. Whether it wouldn't matter if it's in this case it was a female. This man was attracted to this female, and therefore he wanted a relationship with her. And in their ruling, in their decision, they talked about, well, there was inappropriate emails or text messages going back and forth, but it wasn't actually back and forth. What happened is that the dentist sent this lady inappropriate emails about I think he asked her something crazy like how many orgasms have you had or something to that effect, and she just ignores it because she feels uncomfortable with that kind of. But he's the boss, so what do? Do you tell the boss like don't text? Because then you'll get exactly what happened. But I guess in the wife's mind, because she didn't say anything or protest it, she's somehow condoning it rather than her being in fear of her job if she says something. So the wife, well, she didn't protest it. She's not saying any, because there was no text messages from if I understood it correctly, from her to him that was inappropriate. There was stuff about her child care. Hey, I got to do something with child care. I might be late for work, or I got to get new child care because it's one of his work, or we moved, and blah. It was all about her child care whenever she talked with him outside of work. About now, the Supreme Court rule, Iowa Supreme Court rules that that's not a work-related issue. Actually, if I can't get to work because of child care issues, why isn't that a work-related issue? But no, that's their logic. Is talking about child care isn't work-related, and I'm not even going to I'm not even going to go there with that one. That's odd. But going back to their feelings things, if you don't like black people, and that's going to manifest itself. That's a feeling you have, and it's usually manifested through some type of action. You say something, you do something, you start engaging in certain behavior, sabotage, disciplining them for no reason, applying a different standard to them, having problems with them doing stuff that other people do the exact same thing. But that's how it manifests. So it's the way you feel about them. It's always a feeling. All discrimination is going to be based upon a feeling. It's impossible to discriminate against somebody with respect to anything unless you have a feeling towards them. Unless you're talking about a disparate impact discriminatory treatment, which means that you have a policy or rule or something that's in effect, and it's not intended to target anybody specifically, but the end result is that it targets a group of people. It disproportionately affects a group of people unfairly. For example, like if you as an employer had a rule that I'm going to look at your credit history, and if you have a horrible credit history, I'm not going to hire you for this job. The problem with that is that even though that's everybody, let's say you do it to everybody and you apply it to everybody. The problem with that in this society, the credit of certain groups of people is disproportionately poor compared to others. So it's going to have an impact on minority groups, blacks, Hispanics, and other minority groups. More negative has a more negative effect. It's going to affect them more negatively than it would affect the other groups. And that's why, even though that the rule you have isn't intended to be discriminatory, the result is discriminatory. So your feelings aren't involved in that type of discrimination. But that's not what they're talking about here. They're talking about the man outright told her, I'm terminating you because of the way he's feeling, and he believes that this relationship would go further if she stayed on. In other words, he's saying, if you stayed on, I'd end up having an affair with you. And I know you feel good about yourself. It's good that you feel confident about your skills. But what makes you think that this woman is going to have an affair with you? You've already tried to say something inappropriate to her in a text message, and she just ignored you. I guess you think because she doesn't scold you or get on you about your message that somehow she condones it. No, here's an idea. She doesn't say anything to you because you're the boss, and she's scared if she checks the boss, something's going to happen to her. So she just leaves it alone. Maybe if I just don't say anything, he'll go away. But he didn't go away. The wife finds the text message and stuff like that and like fire her because your feelings towards her are just totally inappropriate. But the idea of the Supreme Court concluding that feeling some way about someone isn't discriminatory is absurd, because all discrimination, no matter what it is, with respect to not, like I said, not disparate impact, but your regular run-of-the-mill discrimination always involves you feeling a way about a certain racial group, certain ethnic group, certain sexual orientation, certain religion, a certain gender, etc. You always feel some way about them, and it's absurd to suggest that feelings have nothing to do with, or isn't the law isn't protecting you from the way someone feels. That's exactly what it's protecting you from. But you got to realize Iowa has some strange employment rulings, employment ideas. I'll give you a case about the Iowa Civil Rights Commission. This is what I've known the Civil Rights Commission to do stuff like this with respect to a racial discrimination case. You had a person who was complaining that his manager was treating him differently because of his race. That person goes to the HR and complains. The HR calls the manager up there and says, hey, we're getting complaints that you're treating this guy differently because of his race. What does the company do? The company fires the guy for complaining. So the guy goes to the Civil Rights Commission. He complained to first. He asked the Civil Rights Commission what should he do, and he said you should talk to your HR and see what they do. Horrible idea. Don't ever. I recommend people don't ever do that. Never let HR know what you're doing, because they'll come up with a reason to fire you. Never do that. But that's what the Civil Rights Commission said do. So the person goes back after he gets fired. He goes back, hey man, they fired me for that. So they said, well, that's a retaliation also. So of course the Civil Rights Commission talks to the company and asks the company, like, hey, he's saying you discriminated just because of his race. He was complaining to his manager and the manager, all this stuff. The company submits their documentation to the Civil Rights Commission, and surprisingly, this is what the company told the Civil Rights Commission. So I'm thinking that the company sees nothing wrong with this. The company itself said to the Civil Rights Commission, we had the manager who he was accusing of treating him differently because of his race conducted an investigation into his conduct as a manager. They had the manager conduct the investigation into whether the manager was treating the person differently because of the race. The manager handpicked witnesses. The manager went around to only the people he wanted, who would verify what the manager said, but the manager didn't trust them. So the manager had them send emails to him of their statements of what they wanted to say to the HR. Every statement the witness has goes straight to the manager. It doesn't go to HR, it goes to the manager. The manager in his statements says that he's read all of their statements. Now he's writing out a statement based on their statements, and he's going to be submitting it to HR. HR gets it, reads over it. Okay. Of course, the manager concludes he's not treating anyone differently because of his race. That's surprising. So the HR rubber stamps and said, our investigation shows that he had no problems with this guy. He never treated anybody. And they turned it over. This is what they turned over to the Civil Rights Commission. Now, according to federal law, state law, and even the EEOC, the Iowa Civil Rights Commission, you can't do that. That's not a unbiased investigation. That investigation is clearly biased and unfair. The person accused cannot be a part of the investigation at all, and he definitely can't conduct the investigation. They have it so, if I read it correctly, the boss of the person accused can't even conduct the investigation because he's too close. But this company actually allowed the accused himself to conduct the investigation. So you would think that this will be an easy one for the Civil Rights Commission to say, no, you can't do this. Is absurd. Wrong. The Iowa Civil Rights Commission looked at that and said, man, they gave reasonable. They didn't even question the investigation. They said the investigation was fair. They said they said, well, the company said they did a fair investigation, but it doesn't matter what they say. They told you what they did. You should be looking at your policies and rules and say, this isn't fair. We don't even care. We don't even care if that a supervisor did everything fairly, even though by his own statement he didn't, because he talked to the witnesses up beforehand, had them send him the emails. He read their statements and wrote his statement. So he didn't even do it fair, even in his own statement. But the Iowa Civil Rights, by their own rules, should have said, this is it. But they went the other way. They said, this is a fair, unbiased investigation, stood by the employer, and said, well, we're going to look further into it. But why is there anything to look further into? This is clearly a violation of all procedures on a federal, state, and your own level. But that's how Iowa is. Iowa is a strange state when it comes to employment stuff. They are so, this may be for every state. I don't know, every state may be like this. But they look at it like this. The employer brings in tax dollars. The employer brings in money for Iowa. So they want to do everything they can to satisfy that employer. So they're going to side with that employer almost on all occasions. And this is it's weird, I believe. This is on a personal level. I think it's weird in a society where we're all supposed to be a part of a group that we have rules and laws in effect that allow people to, for example, fire someone just because they want to. We're all supposed to be a part of this team. So, but when something happens to the country as a whole, we're all supposed to come together. Why? Why would I come together and work with this person or work with you all as a whole when any other time you say, okay, it's okay to discriminate against me. It's okay to treat me differently because I'm a woman or because I'm black or because I'm a homosexual or you don't like my religion. It's okay to treat me differently and unfairly any other time. But if something happens in this country, we should all join together. No. That's not how it should be. That's absurd. I'm not going to work with you when you treat me different any other time. No. I mean, that's what happens. It's like they look for reasons to discriminate against people. They look for reasons to have problems with people. And it's amazing that the civil rights leaders, the NAACP, the Urban League, and all them people see nothing wrong with employment laws like this. They don't make it, as you know, it's not even a crime. If an employer says, I fired a person because I just don't like homosexuals. If they say that, you can sue them. That's all you can do. You can sue them in a civil case. That's not a crime. A person, in this society, a person needs a job to pay their bills, to send their kids to school. I mean, just to live, you need a job. That's your health care is attached to your job. But if I don't like a person because they're a homosexual or they're a woman or they're black, I can fire them and this society sees nothing wrong with this, yet they're saying that we should all come together and work together. And yet, no, that's just an absurd idea. That's ridiculous. So it's not really surprising that the Supreme Court made that, Iowa Supreme Court made that ruling, but it's unfair. It's a total weird interpretation of the what it is to be discriminatory, because they're sitting here arguing on whether or not having feelings for someone and firing them because you have feelings is discriminatory. It seemed like none of them, and I think there was either 6 or I can't even remember how many people are on our Iowa Supreme Court. It's either 6 or 10, but they're all male. I'm thinking there's 6. They're all male, all white males, and they don't seem, and so they probably never even experienced any kind of this employment discrimination. So they have no clue on where that comes from. But the idea that they can't even, none of them can grasp the concept that all discrimination involves how you feel towards someone. That's why you discriminate against them. If people were like machines or robots or some type of android, they wouldn't care about your color, about your sexual orientation, about your sex, your gender, your religion. They wouldn't care about anything like that. It's because there are humans and they do feel. That's why they discriminate. That's why they're capable of discriminating. And so it's just really odd that these so-called the best judges we have in this state, sitting on the Supreme Court, can't understand that feelings are the backbone of discriminatory treatment. They didn't understand. None of them, not one person understood that on that court. And that's just odd, to say the least. That's all I got to say about this topic. I'll see you guys next time.